going to be discussing brand new research that shows that they're looking at certain substances that are different in the stool of MS patients and how this may be able to determine the progression of multiple sclerosis. If we haven't met, my name is Pam Bartha, and I'm the author of Become a Wellness Champion and the founder of Live Disease Free. I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis over 35 years ago, and by the grace of God, I learned early on that the MS was caused by infections, by parasites in the body. And long story short, I've been able to live MS free for over 35 years now, had another child, went to university, got a science degree, and I've had the amazing privilege to coach hundreds of wellness champions all over the world, helping them to recover from chronic diseases and also pre-diagnosed, but just treating the parasites that are causing the disease by following a holistic approach. And today we're going to be talking about new research that is, they found this specific substance in the stool of MS patients, and this biomarker they feel can really help to be able to understand better like the progression of this disease, multiple sclerosis, because the higher the presence of this biomarker, the more progression of disease we have. So it's known that different researchers and doctors, they have studied the stool looking for parasites, and we're really poor at doing that. We're not very good at that at all. But they also use stool to look for colorectal cancer. And this study that we're going to be talking about is a 2024 study. It was April 2024, so just this year, really new. And the name of this study is called Stool GFAP, so Stool GFAP, is elevated in progressive multiple sclerosis, and this is associated with disability, and it predicts disease worsening, so MS worsening. And this study was done by the Harvard Medical School team, and they looked at the stool of healthy people and people that have multiple sclerosis. So they looked at 26 healthy subjects or participants, 61 participants that had relapsing remitting MS, and 28 subjects of multiple sclerosis or participants of MS that had progressive MS. And so they did a stool analysis when they started this study, and then they did a stool analysis 2 years later. And they found that, it's been known that with multiple sclerosis, that if we are diagnosed with MS, that we would have a higher than normal amount of this GFAP. I'll just call it GFAP or GFAP for short. It actually stands for glial fibrillary acidic protein. So glial fibrillary acidic protein. And it's a protein, basically. So when they looked at healthy people versus relapsing remitting MS patients versus progressive MS patients, they found that in the stool that this substance was much higher in people that had progressive multiple sclerosis after 2 years. So investigators found that the stool levels of this GFAP in people with progressive multiple sclerosis was 87% higher than those in relapsing remitting forms, and it was 103% higher than the healthy controls or healthy people that took the study, or that were part of the study, I should say. So, of course, these are very significant differences. So it's not to say that relapsing remitting did not have higher than normal amounts, but progressive multiple sclerosis had the highest levels of this GFAP substance in their stool, and then just relapsing remitting was less but still higher than normal healthy controls or healthy volunteers. So the stool GFAP, or GFAP levels, they also correlated with some of you, I'm sure probably all of you, if you've been diagnosed with MS, you've had to fill out these EDSS, basically quality of life surveys. So the levels of this substance in the stool also correlated with more of these, like a poor score on this survey, where which would indicate worsening of the multiple sclerosis. And then that was over 2 years. And there was also a couple of other surveys they used. They used a symbol digit modulity testing, so SDMT. That was a different type of survey. And also there was a NeuroQOL instrument. So the NeuroQOL instrument, it would measure things like lower extremity function, cognitive function, anxiety, and all those changes were statistically significant in people with basically the people that had progressive, that had lower scores on all of these different surveys, and they also had much higher levels of this GFAP substance in their stool. And the researchers concluded that this substance is really a biomarker for progressive multiple sclerosis in particular. And it's not just like this substance is present more in progressive, but it was also linked to a decrease in quality of life and also a progression of the disease. So they feel that by measuring this substance, that it can really be a biomarker linked with disease stage and course, like the progression of it. And they feel that it's a brand new way that they can study the role of the microbiome in MS, because they know that the microbiome is different in multiple sclerosis. It is not healthy. And I've shared a lot of research about that. So I've done an event probably about 3 weeks ago and a blog post, Pam, why do you believe that MS is caused by parasites? If you haven't seen that yet, make sure to go. I've got at least 20 significant points of evidence that show that MS is, or confirms that MS is, an infectious disease caused by a parasitic infestation. I'll be adding this research on. And it's funny because every time I find like a new biomarker and a new substance, and I'm going to talk about the relevance of this GFAP or GFAP substance, like, why is it there? It's not just that MS is this mysterious disease that like a substance just shows up for no reason. No, it is there for a very specific reason, and it's linked with other diseases also. So all of the information that I'm sharing with you, it all ties back to gut dysbiosis, to our microbiome is out of balance, and in inflammation and injury caused by these parasites. And then, of course, the immune system is going to be working really hard. And so this substance would be another indication that we're dealing with injury and inflammation in the gut. And we know that there is this enteric nervous system. There's first of all, let's talk about, there's the central nervous system, which we know is the brain and the spinal cord. And then all the other nerves in the body would be the peripheral nervous system. And then we have this nervous, a lot of nerves inside the gut. And that's the enteric. And this is where the substance, this GFAP substance, is found in higher amounts in people with MS, and also especially progressive, but also MS, relapsing, remitting, and then in other diseases like Parkinson's and colitis, and probably other diseases also. So these researchers from Harvard Medical School, they concluded that this substance is a biomarker for progressive multiple sclerosis. They believe that it would be a good biomarker. And this finding, or what they have found, suggests that clinicians and patients one day will have another reliable way of predicting the course of individual MS. And, I don't believe that it's going to be really helpful for that, because we know that if you've been diagnosed with relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis, then within years, at least 80% of people the MS will turn into progressive multiple sclerosis. So for some of us, it's more quickly. For others, it takes longer time. And what I see in the hundreds, if not thousands of students that I have worked with is that it has more to do with the environment. It has to do with what we're eating. Are we able to be active? Are we managing our stress? Are we on a lot of antibiotics or we're not? Like all of these different things, like are we really working hard at kind of slowing these parasites down, decreasing their population, or are we abundantly feeding them? We're stressed out, we're not getting enough sleep. All of those are we in a moldy environment, a lot of wireless radiation? So that is really what determines how quickly the relapsing remitting will turn into progressive. So this kind of a biomarker, just as saying, well, oh, it'll be a biomarker, we can just measure it and see, it's kind of like, duh, like if you have progressive multiple sclerosis or if you're feeling terrible, then this substance is probably in a higher amount in your stool. But what it does help us with, what is valuable to know about this, is just how it is really linked with a lot of other inflammatory bowel conditions and other neurodegenerative diseases, and how this substance, this protein, it's created by genes in our body, and the upregulation of producing this protein really occurs when we have injury to our nerves. And that would be from, and we know inflammation and we know parasites, etc. So that is just more evidence that's showing, especially because it's linked with inflammatory bowel disease, and how that also is linked with different types of infections and parasites that's causing it. And remember, I shared research showing that if you are diagnosed with MS, you have a higher risk of developing colitis and Crohn's disease later on. But if you have colitis or Crohn's, you don't necessarily have a statistically significant increase in developing MS. So it's really, really interesting with all of that. So I'm going to go to your questions. If you have any questions about these infections or parasites, maybe this is the first time you've ever heard this link. Like one of our students in Europe, he spent 4 years researching, trying to find some clue as to what was causing his disease. And he wasn't able to work, and he wasn't able to live his life. And when he found our work, he was just shocked. He's like, I've scoured the scientific literature to see if there's a link, like some kind of other than mysterious immune system attacking itself. And then when he found the link between parasites and MS and other diseases, it all clicks and it all makes sense. So really important that you start to see that link, and you watch, again, go to my blog post about 3 weeks ago. It's Pam, why do you believe MS is caused by parasites? Share that with your practitioners, with your functional medicine practitioners, with your nurse practitioners, chiropractors, nutritionists, your neurologists. I know most of the neurologists are not there yet, but there are some neurologists that I'm hearing from my students that are really starting to open their eyes to all of this, and they're really becoming disillusioned with their profession and really understanding that they're very limited in how they can help their patients, because it's solely based on an MRI looking for lesions, or lumbar puncture looking for antibody bands, and then put us on the disease-modifying, immunosuppressive, expensive disease-modifying maintenance drugs, which just make us weaker, and we suffer terribly. And I was speaking with another lady today who is joining our program, and she was mentioning how, she doesn't have MS, but she's been dealing with terrible, terrible symptoms and just not being able to function. She was in tears. Anyhow, she thought she had Lyme disease. Maybe she tested, I can't remember if she tested positive or negative, but was treated for Lyme for quite a significant period of time. And she just wasn't getting better. And so she ended up passing this big worm one time, and she took it in to her doctor, and she had a stool test done. She actually put a worm in her stool test and it came back negative. She passed more worms. She took it into her doctor. She said, "What is this?" And the doctor said, "Well, that's a parasite." And then she says, "Well, I'm putting this in my stool test and it's coming back negative. Like, how come they are not able to identify this?" And she's like, "I don't know." I've heard so many stories like that, except for she actually got her doctor to say, "No, that is a worm. That is definitely a worm." But the labs are not picking this up. I don't know why. I don't know if they're just in such a rush and they're just kind of like dumping the contents and diluting it down and just taking some of the liquid. I don't know what their procedure is, but it's ridiculous that they're not seeing this. I just don't understand. And it's so frustrating for these poor people. So that's the dilemma that we have, is that we have this mountain of evidence that shows that MS is an infectious disease caused by parasites, not just worms, but protists are involved, bacteria, fungi. It's dysbiosis. So we have these microbes, these disease-causing microbes, and we're out of balance. We don't have enough health-promoting microbes, too many disease-causing microbes. And so then our body, and so this is in this situation with this research, there are these cells that really support our nerve cells. They're called glia cells or glial cells, and they really support our nerve cells with nutrition and just support. So they will, that is a protein. So glia, that's a protein. So it's a protein that's produced in the presence of injury to the nerve cells. And so they summarize with this study, they summarize that the current evidence supporting the potential involvement, this is a different study actually. So the enteric glial cells, they are one of the major cell types. So these cells that support our nerve cells, they outnumber our nerve cells and they do all kinds of different things. And they're super, super important. So to summarize, in a different study where they were looking at digestive GFAP levels also increased in Parkinson's disease. So maybe somebody who has Parkinson's disease. We summarized the current evidence supporting the potential involvement of these enteric glial cells, so the cells that support our nerves in our gut, in several important immunological disorders, including inflammatory bowel disease, celiac disease, and autoimmune enteropathy disease. So the whole presence of this substance is found in not just multiple sclerosis, in other neurodegenerative diseases also, and other autoimmune diseases, in inflammatory bowel disease. So they're trying to isolate all of these different autoimmune. It's like, no, you have multiple sclerosis. No, you have arthritis. No, you have Crohn's disease or celiac. But when you work in this field, you see that people that have MS, especially if they're on the disease-modifying drugs, which make them immunosuppressed, then they could end up with 3 to 5 diseases. And again, it's so huge that the microbiome is very different in multiple sclerosis, but also in other chronic diseases like Parkinson's, inflammatory bowel, etc. And we know that there are literally hundreds, if not thousands, of different parasites that can get out of balance in our digestive tract, leading to leaky gut, leading to malabsorption, leading to food sensitivities. And then these parasites cross into the blood. They move throughout our body. They live in our blood. They move into organs. They move into the central nervous system. And also, we've talked lots about how we can end up with a leaky blood-brain barrier, and they can actually, and some of the parasites can cause mini brain bleeds. I've shared all of this research. And again, like, to add this point to the over 20 pieces of evidence that I have shared with you, is like, what is this expert panel doing? The expert panel of, I'm sure they're neurologists, but they're probably professors at universities, and they are the expert panel that decide how MS is diagnosed and treated. How is it that they're not looking at this research and they're not considering it? And like, why is it that just average people like myself maybe have a science degree, a little bit of science background, but how is it that we can put this information together? We can see the connection, but they're not interested in it at all. They don't want to even look at it. So all of the mountain of evidence where, we know the gut microbiome is out of balance. We know that Dr. Alan McDonald has found developing tapeworm larvae and tapeworms, adult tapeworms developing in the central nervous system. Roundworms have just been discovered in MS in the central nervous system, candida, fungal infections. And then also the over 100 years of research linking MS and malaria, and then also MS and Lyme disease, where even the MS Society is saying that, oh my gosh, there's a lot of similarities and in testing, in symptoms, but they're different. And that was taken down. That web page they had up that I've been talking about, I wonder why they took it down. I don't know. Maybe it's too confusing for people. So go to that blog post that I have and share it with everyone. Please do, because we need to get this research out. It's not going to change in our, like with our healthcare system. It is not going to change. We have to have a grassroots effort of people sharing this information with other people, because that's the only way things are going to change. There's too much money involved. You look at the MS industry, you look at the cancer industry, and they all add up to several $trillion. And that's because we're not treating the cause, we're treating symptoms, we're treating the immune system that they say is dysfunctioning, which it is not. It needs help. Well, maybe it's overwhelmed and maybe it's not working optimally, because it's kind of like a losing war. There comes a point, right? If you have a war where the enemy is so advanced, the numbers are just, our soldiers cannot defend us because the numbers of the enemy are too great. They've gained too much ground, and then we lose the war. And that's what's happening in chronic disease. It's not that our immune system is bad. It needs help. It needs support. We don't need to destroy our soldiers, our B cells, our T cells, and other cells. We don't need to suppress our immune system to block it out of the central nervous system. What we need to do is we need to identify which microbes are out of balance. We don't have good tests, so we can use energy testing for that. That helps. Also, our symptoms, our diagnosis, our health history, the health history of our parents. That's enough to help us to build a very strong plan to recover from these parasites. So again, I'm going to be sharing, and I found another substance that's out of balance, and I think it's more in the blood. So it's really neat to put all of this together, and it's not just like, oh, this substance is out of balance in MS. It's like, what is that substance there for? What does it do, right? Oh, it's linked with inflammation. It's linked with all of these other diseases. Oh, I thought all these diseases are supposed to be separate. No, they're not. There's a lot of overlap with our students that have Parkinson's, or they have ALS or PLS, or, diabetes, etc. They will use very similar parasite drugs, not always the same, but very similar. So we do have overlapping parasites, but then maybe with some different types of diseases, like some parasites like to live in the joints and cause more arthritic diseases. Some like to live in our reproductive organs. Some like the eyes. They like the hyaluronic acid levels in the eyes. Some love the central nervous system. So they have their favorite places to live in our muscles, in the gastrointestinal tract, wherever. And so, yes, we will have different types, even within the same disease. Like we could have multiple sclerosis and we may not all test positive for the same parasite treatments. We've seen that a lot, which is frustrating, because otherwise we could have a cookie cutter treatment plan for everyone. So I'm going to go to your questions. Let me see, there's the cursor. All right, so hi James, you're very welcome. Thank you so much for your kind words. Michael, you're so very welcome. It's really huge information. It's like, it's little, but it's big, because again, it's another connection that MS is not separate from all these other diseases. It is all the same. It is a disruption to our microbiome. again, it's linked in the gut, right? Finding this substance is in the gut, and they know the microbiome. And we know that a lot of our immune system, I think it's 70% of our immune system is located in our gut. And so it all makes sense, right? It's all common sense when you learn this. Hi, Frank. Hi, Taylor. Off topic, but can you tell me if mold exposure has anything to do with a flare up? Oh, absolutely. So, the mycotoxins produced by mold are some of the most toxic substances in the world, and they're immunosuppressive. So, when you're loaded with parasites, actually, let me backtrack. Not some of our students, before they were diagnosed with MS, they lived in a moldy environment. So if you live in a moldy environment, it suppresses your immune system, and that allows the parasites to gain more ground more quickly. And if you have a parasitic infestation, which your body is trying to manage, and then you are living in a moldy environment, the mycotoxins, the toxins produced by the mold, they are going to really suppress the immune system so that the parasites will gain more ground and will be more disabling for us. So, yes, they can be linked with a flare. Absolutely. It's very important to get out of a moldy environment. There's a good documentary. It's a little bit older, but it's very good. It's called Moldy, Moldy. And it really helps you to see how mold exposure can cause a lot of neurological symptoms that we would experience with all kinds of neurodegenerative diseases. So, very important that if you are in a moldy environment, get out of it. If you can't leave, then you have to have really good remediation. You have to, get rid of the mold properly, and it's probably a good idea to use ozone to kill all the mold spores in the air. Just remember that the spores will end up in your curtains and in your clothing and on your walls and in your carpet. And so it's very important that you understand that. And they talk about that in that documentary. So that's really helpful. And Joanne, and also chlorella is really good to take as a binder for mold toxins. It's a very strong binder of mycotoxins. And you can take many tablets. You can take 10, 15, 20 tablets, couple, 3 times a day. And the strongest binder would be the chlorella pyrenodosa. It's very safe. It's safe for pregnant women. It's safe for children to take. It's very nutritious, and it will help. But you have to get rid of the mold in the environment. You've got to detox the mold inside of you. Sometimes we need to treat the mold inside of us, and that would be through an antifungal medication. You need to work with somebody, though, when you use those medications. But you need to use a very not a holistic, but a very well-rounded approach to deal with it on every front. Hi, Joanne. You're having gallbladder issues, painful. Can that be parasites? Yes, the parasites love to live in the gallbladder liver meridian, or the liver gallbladder meridian. And I've read studies where even like intestinal flukes or different flukes, they can end up, plugging different ducts, and they move around. So yes, very important that, like with our students, as they are treating the parasites, once they're feeling a lot better, they do several liver gallbladder flushes to flush out parasites in that area. Tanya, what kind do I to get rid of my body of parasites? I'm thinking you're asking about what kind of treatments. We have found that herbs by themselves are not effective enough, especially if you have strong symptoms or like you have a disease diagnosis. If you're just a healthy person with maybe a little bit of gas, constipation, yes, you can use herbal blends. There's so many different types. You can go to the health food store. Common herbs would be wormwood, cloves, and black walnut. That would be in the ingredients of the herbal blend. There can be other ones too. That would be more for like protists and worms, things like that. But on their own, like if you have multiple sclerosis or other diseases, it's not going to be enough. If you have very large worms, you probably won't pass them with just the herbs. If you have parasites that have gotten into your central nervous system or in your tissues, those herbs won't be strong enough on their own. We use a combination of the herbs, antimicrobial herbs. So even things like garlic are super helpful, but on their own are not enough. And then we also use parasite drugs. So there's specific parasite drugs for roundworms, specific ones for tapeworms, for intestinal flukes, for liver flukes, for protists. And then we like herbs for things like bacteria. Uh, so let's say we have Borrelia or there's other bacteria like E. coli, etc. The herbs can be really helpful for that, but the parasite drugs are much more helpful for the bigger parasites and even for the protists. And then for fungus, you can use herbs, but there's also fungal medications that are really helpful. So if you have more of a yeast exposure like candida issues you're dealing with, then fluconazole, which is diflucan, is helpful. Again, working with a practitioner. And if you have more mold issues, then itraconazole, which is Sporanox, nystatin capsules are helpful, but they're only going to work in the gut. I don't like the liquid. It has sugar in it, and Candida loves sugar. And then also just the herbs. So there's, garlic is incredibly antifungal. There's Podarco, which is a herb that's antifungal. But you really need to work with somebody if you have a lot of parasites because they're difficult to decrease their presence really well. And then we use oxygen therapy. So there is an oxidizing agent that I can't talk about here, but I have done events about it. I just look for live disease-free and treating parasites with oxygen or oxygen therapy and treating parasites, something like that. And you'll find the blog post that I did, and there you'll find all the information. Taylor, you're very welcome. This explains my first MS flare since I was diagnosed 10 years ago. I'm really sorry to hear that. I hope, Taylor, that you really start to explore this and start to look into this because this is your answer. And you've already lost 10 years of living with MS and you can recover. We have a lot of students that have recovered. I shared just more recently one of our students, Leslie. She is was a trauma nurse, ICU and trauma nurse, and she's going back to work. And she was really, really sick. And you can go listen to her story. She's an amazing, beautiful lady, and she worked hard. And she went from, like paralysis, I think, on her left side, and numbness all from her neck down, and having difficulty breathing, and just not being able to work, and just really living in a scary place. And now she's going back to work. And that has just been a few months. I think within 3 treatment cycles, she's gotten to this place. She's not done treating, but she has decreased the population of those parasites enough that she feels virtually symptom-free and she's able to go back to work, which is super exciting. Do I ship medications internationally? I'm not a pharmacist. I'm not a doctor. I cannot do that. That's not what I'm allowed to do. So I don't have anything to do with medications. What I do is I'm a coach and a teacher and I'm an educator. I put a plan together, a step-by-step plan to show people how to recover. I was speaking with like 2 different people today, and they cannot find, they have spent a fortune on their health trying to find answers, trying to find somebody that can help them. And, just lots of money on testing, lots of money on supplements. And through their own research, they found me and they really get it. And so what you have to do is you have to be the director of your health. I'm in my 60s, and I really believed before I was diagnosed with MS that my doctor would fix me. That was his job. I was a healthy person. I figured I would always be healthy until one day I wasn't. Until one day I lost all vision in my left eye, just suddenly. Yes, I was a little more tired. I had 2 children under the age of 3. I just thought that was tired of being a young mom. But little did I know that I was like a walking time bomb, and it was like I had a black patch on my left eye for a few weeks. I was rushed to I went to an eye doctor, an eye specialist. Then I went to an MS University Hospital clinic. I was diagnosed with MS. I also had a little bit of tingling in my legs, weakness in my legs. So that was my start. And by the grace of God, as I mentioned before, I learned that what I was dealing with was infection. I learned first about Candida, then we learned about Lyme disease, and then we learned about all of these other parasites. And the larger parasites, they really cause a lot of problem. They infect us with Borrelia, which causes Lyme disease. They infect us with other bacteria. They will cause more pain and agony in our bodies than the smaller parasites will. So we need to treat from big to small. We don't treat from small parasites to big parasites. We treat the bigger ones first, and then we work down to the smaller ones. And we do that in cycles. And that is the success. That is the strength of the Live Disease-Free plan of the program, is that we first help you to get ready to treat so you're feeling a lot better before you start treating. Then you will tolerate the treatments a lot better and you'll be able to treat a lot more aggressively. And then you start treating. And again, it's not going to be just take 2 weeks of parasite medications and you're cured, because think about it. Some of these worms, they can lay 200,000 eggs in a day. They have eggs, they have larvae, they hide in biofilms. And so they're very happy in our body and they're pretty challenging to treat. And I think the big reason why they're hard to treat is because our healthcare system has ignored them for decades. For decades. When I was really young, living on a farm, our local general practitioners knew that we would have to be dewormed. The kids, the whole family would be dewormed. This is a lost skill. So we haven't invested in better tests. We haven't invested in finding better treatments or more effective treatments or a combination of treatments. And so this is the dilemma that we face. And it's not just our general practitioners and our neurologists that don't know this, but even our functional medicine doctors and our naturopaths. They know about Candida, they know about mold and Lyme disease, but when it comes to like all these other parasites, they're like, I don't know, like, sure, they might think we have other parasites, but they don't know which ones we have because there are no good tests. And they have been taught that parasites are not a problem in developed countries, only if you travel to another country. And I would like to challenge that, because we have parasites all around us, in our livestock, in our pets, on our produce. So one lady today, she says, oh, my husband and I went vegetarian because we saw a worm in our meat. And it's like, and she's eating fish now. And I said, fish have worm parasites too. They have tapeworms and different And she says, no. And I'm like, yes, like all meat can be contaminated with parasites, but so can produce, because what they're fertilizing it with, who's picking the produce, how it's shipped, like what it's exposed to. If you're working in the dirt, in the soil, if you're walking barefoot on contaminated soil, certain worms can latch on and can burrow in through your heel. If you're swimming in a lake, very often there's parasites which cause swimmer's itch, schistosomiasis, E. coli, and that the schistosomiasis would be a blood fluke. So we don't have to be paranoid. It's just like we're not drinking raw water. So maybe in some underdeveloped countries where they're not able to chlorinate their water or treat their water, and so they're drinking raw water, yes, that definitely would expose them to a lot of parasites too. But otherwise, we are exposed to a lot of parasites. And I think a big problem for us is that we've used a lot more antibiotics than maybe some of the people in like Africa, for example. So myself, I was on a lot of antibiotics for acne. Even before that, we were from a generation where the doctors, they really scared my parents, saying that, if your children have chronic strep, it can really damage their heart. And so every time we had a high fever, my mom would rush us into the doctor and almost beg the doctor to put us on antibiotics, because so this could have been a viral infection and they didn't always do cultures. And we were put on antibiotics all the time because mom was so worried that we could end up with strep and we could end up with, a heart condition later on in life. And so we were on our fair share of antibiotics. I know my brothers, they all had their tonsils removed. So if you have a lot of tonsillitis, that means you've had a lot of bacterial infections, antibiotics also. But what was different with me than my siblings was that I was on tetracycline for months. And tetracycline is a broad spectrum antibiotic. And I was on that for months. And that really devastates our health promoting microbes, that layer of protection that we have in our gut. And that really makes us susceptible to the parasites in our environment. So I lived on a farm and I was outside all the time, and I helped my dad with the pigs. We had bunnies, we had cats, we had dogs, we had turkeys, we had cattle, we had a horse, which I wasn't around, it was a little bit wild. So we had tons of animals and we were outside all the time. And so I would have been very vulnerable to, more so than my siblings, because none of them were on the antibiotic that is broad spectrum that just wipes out a lot of our health promoting microbes. And that was given to me because I had acne, which means I was out of balance, because that's what causes acne, is if your microbiome is out of balance, and then you end up with more pimples, etc. So I hope, like, me sharing my story really helps you to understand how you got to this place. And maybe I'll do a live event at one point, because it's really important that we understand this is not a mystery. This didn't just happen to us mysteriously. When you understand what causes MS and you understand the parasites, then you start looking back and you go, yeah, I was sick often. I had allergies. I had stomach issues. I was on antibiotics quite often. I had ear infections or tonsillitis often, or strep throat. So all of the bladder infection. So all of this really helps you to see, like, wow, I was out of balance before the age of 10. For our students that have chronic disease, often before the age of 10, their microbiome was out of balance. And so then this all supports the research, the evidence that I show that, before our first MS attack, years before our first MS attack, we have gut issues, right? We have more constipation. We're talking to our doctor more about, like gas, constipation, pain. As a child, I had a lot of stomach aches. Whenever we would eat food like with a lot of sugar or processed carbs, I'd be laying on the floor with a stomach ache. I was always skinnier than the other siblings. And my mom would try to fatten me up by giving me ice cream, which was the worst thing she could do. So all of this, you just kind of go, oh, I see. And the neat thing is that when you get it, and then you have a proven plan to restore balance, which is the Live Disease-Free plan, you learn this yourself, and then you can get yourself out of the danger zone, restore balance enough that you feel amazing. And then after that, then you learn how to manage this health and to protect and guard it. You will be exposed to parasites again in the future, but in the future, you will treat them early on before you have, like, you will never get the flare again if you treat matters early. And that's the key. If we could go to our doctor and say, I haven't been sleeping as well, I'm a lot more tired during the day, my gut has been off, like I'm not having regular daily bowel movements, a little bit more gas. Our doctor should go, oh my gosh, sounds like you've got parasites. We need to do a parasite cleanse right now. And if he did that and treated us early, we would not have cancer. We would not have multiple sclerosis, arthritis, and the other 80 some autoimmune diseases, heart disease, etc., because he's treating it early. Could you imagine saving trillions of dollars in healthcare? Could you imagine, like, how that would decrease, taxes and really help us? Like, right now, I don't know about you, but the taxes are killing everyone. Like, we're taxed in Canada, it's incredible how much we're taxed. And it's getting to the point where, and then the cost of living is going up so much. And so if we could just really stay out of the hospitals, stay out of the doctor's office, if we get in a car accident, thank God we have our healthcare system. They will put us back together. They will help us manage the pain. They're really good at that. If we have premature labor and the baby is born early, they're really good at saving the baby's life. But if we could avoid all of the chronic diseases, then we can just live our life, right? And that's the key, is that is how things are going to change. And they will only change if you help spread the word. If you help to go on our website, livediseasefree.com, look at the blog posts, pick and choose topics that you find fascinating, forward that to different groups, different health groups where people are, doesn't matter, MS or different types of groups, to functional medicine doctors, to nurse practitioners, to other naturopaths, chiropractors. It's so exciting that, I hear like these healthcare professionals from all over the place that are referring people to us, and they're getting it. They're starting to be curious about it, and they're starting to get it. But this will only come from the bottom up. This will only come from you sharing this research. And so maybe this topic is not something you start with, because it's like one little substance. But for those of you that have been following me, you know that this is one out of over 20 pieces of evidence. And so it's just building that huge amount of proof, the mountain of proof showing that we know what MS is caused by. And then you can decide, do you want to wait for them to get it, to be able to get on board? Or do you want to get your life back? And if you want to get your life back and you can't find support from doctors that understand this, then make sure to watch my masterclass training, because there I show you the steps. Number one, the steps you need to take to recover. And I also will support you if you need support. So this is where you can reach out to me. You can have a chat with me to make sure it's a good fit. You'll also get a link for the Coachathon, which really goes into a lot of detail about the Live Disease-Free plan, like exactly how do we access the treatments and practitioners, and how do we build our plan, and what's all involved with recovery. How long does it take? Will this work if I'm in Europe and you're in North America, Pam? Right? Yes, it'll work if you're in Australia or a different country. We have students in South Africa. We've had Kuwait and India, Egypt, all over Europe. So it doesn't matter where you live. I believe that this is the job that God has given me to do work. So this is kind of like my vocation, other than, of course, being a parent and a grandmother too. So those and a wife. So those are my most important jobs, but this is the work that I do to help others to get their health and their life back. A couple more questions and then I'm going to let you go. So you recently lost balance in your legs, and now I've lost vision in my right eye. Absolutely no help from the healthcare system. You're so very welcome looking into your program. I'm so glad, Taylor. I'm so glad you found me. It just gives me goosebumps. I'm so happy for you, because I know this is your answer. It's not easy. It's not like you pop a pill and in 2 weeks you're going to recover from MS. But when you follow our plan the way I have it laid out, you should notice symptom improvements week by week. And that includes even with the diet. All right. So it's not like you have to wait till you start treating parasites before you start feeling better. By decreasing your carbs enough, you are decreasing the inflammation. And then you will notice that you are noticing symptom improvements that can be in as little as 1 to 2 weeks. So the getting ready to treat is equally important to the treatment part. Wanda, so you had breast cancer and your program would help? Yes. I did an event, so you can go to livediseasefree.com under blog post, and I think there's something about cancer is caused by parasites, something like that. You can even just do a Google search, Live Disease Free and cancer caused by parasites, and you will see, I did that very recently, and you will see that there are many, many parasite drugs that have been known to treat different types of cancers way better than the treatments they're using now. Like, they can cure cancer if you use the right treatments. And then, so like this was research that has been around for many years, kind of got dropped because we have this cancer industry. And then now they're starting to, and I shared a lot of articles like, oh, ivermectin could be a potential, groundbreaking cancer treatment, or albendazole or fenbendazole. So, like, one parasite drug is not going to treat all cancers. I believe that there's different parasites that could cause different types of cancers. But just the fact that they know that parasite drugs treat cancer, but there's no money in these parasite drugs versus the cancer drugs. So the cancer industry is huge, right? And so if you could just treat the parasites, of course, using a holistic approach, and it's going to involve more than one treatment. And again, we use oxygen therapies and the parasite drugs and herbs, plus lifestyle and diet change and all of that. And it is miraculous, right? What happens. So, Devin, keep doing what you are doing. Thank you for your kind words. Last one here I'm going to share is Nico. What would you say is the success rate that you've seen in your students? You do realize this may mean many different things, but improving versus not improving is what I mean. So, you're right. Data is really important. And we're actually looking at, like, what we've been doing is collecting quality of life, so that there is this survey, I think it's, EDSS survey. We've been collecting that. But thus far, I have been working really hard at, developing the program and also research and, producing all of this. Like my website, if you go through the blog post, you will love it, because you will learn so much about why you're sick and what you need to do to recover. But now it's time, that we have better data. So I'm actually looking at, working with professionals to figure out how we can collect more meaningful data. And what I would say, just from experience working with these students, is that when the students follow the plan, I would say the vast majority of them have significant symptom improvements with just diet and lifestyle changes. And then when they're treating, many of them recover. I can't promise full recovery, and everybody's different. Like some people, like that nurse, Leslie, she is back to work in 3 months. She's not totally cured of these parasites, but she's knocked them back a lot, to the point where she's almost symptom-free. And then other people, it might take 6 to 12 months to get to the same place. There's so many variables, and that makes it hard. Like, it depends on the level of support they have. Maybe they live on their own. Maybe they're quite disabled. Maybe they have a husband or a partner or a spouse, and maybe they are in a care home and they're limited to the types of foods that are given to them in the care home. Or maybe they're so disabled and living on their own that they can't, produce, or they can't follow the diet as quickly or as well as, and it's more challenging, right? They've got to buy prepared things. And so, like, all of these factors, some people have more stress than other people. So stress hormones really impact our immune function and the parasites. If you live in a moldy environment, that will impact your recovery. If you have a lot of wireless radiation, maybe you have a 5G transmitter outside of your home, maybe you have a bunch of smart appliances that are talking to each other, and you're on your phone a lot, you've got, your computer, your printer, like all of these different devices that are putting all of this wireless radiation in your environment, that makes the parasites grow more quickly. So that's the problem. We're dealing with a lot of variables, but if you check off those variables and you reduce the wireless radiation, you make sure you don't have mold, you support your physiology, like your low iron, your thyroid, your B12, your vitamin D, so you support your body, you decrease the carbs. The vast majority of people have like huge symptom improvements just from that alone. And then some people, they just start with, parasite drugs they test well for, and literally month by month, they're just doing so amazing. And then others, it's a little bit more trial and error, because maybe they have roundworms, so maybe they test well for that. But maybe they have a high amount of Babesia, right? And so this is where Babesia is a protist. And so this is where you need to work with somebody to help you to kind of figure out the order of treatment, and also making sure to troubleshoot. And, the biggest factor I would say is the carbs. If your carbs are not low enough, you will not notice improvements with diet. It has to do with decreasing the carbs enough so that the parasites are more quiet, inflammation goes down, and then you will notice symptom improvements. And then I'm not a fly on people's walls. So I've been a teacher for over 20 years. I worked in the school district, high school math and science, and middle school. And we have students that are really good implementers, and we have students that are a little bit slower, but it takes them a little longer, but they come around. And that's okay, as long as you're moving forward, as long as you're taking one step at a time. So that is the problem. But that's why I need to work with a professional that can help me to pull together more meaningful data. Like what we would really like to do, I've mentioned this before, we didn't have the bandwidth to do it. I'd love to create an app, a diagnostic app, because we don't have good blood tests, but just putting a lot of different factors in. I'd love to create a continuing education program for healthcare professionals. We'll be looking into that. There's a very big possibility that we have a healthcare professional that's going to start coaching our students. We do have another coach that's been working with us. So we really want to move towards equipping practitioners with this knowledge, with our experience, so that they can start to help more people. Like this is too slow for me. I mean, I'm grateful that I've worked with all of these amazing wellness champions, and they've really taught us a lot. And it's so heartwarming to hear their successes, but it's time that this goes back into the healthcare system, and that we start to look for better testing, and also not just better testing, but really challenging the treatment protocol so that we can help people recover quicker. But I think the biggest thing is to early diagnosis, right? That prevention and early diagnosis of parasites is what really prevents the disease. And there will be a lot of resistance to this, because we're talking about multi-trillion-dollar industry. So yeah, there is going to be, and there has been, a lot of resistance to this. So one person said, sorry, I said too much. Oh, maybe I need to look back at what she was saying. So that is, let's see here. Wanda, I did that one. Devin. Oh, Frank. When doing a liver gallbladder cleanse, does it say to eat millet and rice? Isn't that too high in carbs? So Frank, that's why we don't do a liver gallbladder flush until we've decreased the parasites tremendously. So when you want to do a liver gallbladder flush, if you eat a lot of fat, it's not going to work very well. So what you want to do is you want to decrease the fat before you do a liver gallbladder flush, so that you get a buildup of the bile. So that's the key. If you have a lot of fat, the bile is not going to build up. And that's why you don't do it right off the bat. You first go through the prep phase, you're feeling better. You treat over a few cycles where you're out of the danger zone, you're feeling so much better consistently for a while, and then you can do that. And it's only for a few days, but in order to have a successful gallbladder or liver gallbladder flush, yes, you decrease the fat, and then you have to increase the carbs a little bit. So one person is just saying, sorry, I said too much. I'm just so overwhelmed and grateful. Thank you so much for this truth. God bless. So just know that it does feel a little overwhelming at the start when you learn about this, but that's why we have a system and we have a plan, and it's step by step. And really the biggest learning curve is just getting ready to treat. And then once you start treating, you have most of the learning part done. And then after that, it's just a little bit of adjusting of the treatment cycles. And the treatment cycles are about a month each. And so you're just making adjustments to the treatments, and that's where you need to work with somebody. But this is your answer. So I'm going to let you guys go. Again, thank you so much for spending this time with me. And if you want to help us to bring change, please share this information. Especially go to our website, livediseasefree.com. Look for the event where Pam, why do you think MS is caused by parasites? Share that one. Share my masterclass training. I share a lot of research about the parasites that we know are a problem with multiple sclerosis, that are commonly a problem. Really important to share that. And then if you need support, make sure to reach out, watch my masterclass training, book a time to chat with me, watch the coachathon, and I'll have a wonderful chance to talk with you to make sure it's a good fit for you and welcome you to the program and help you to start to take your health and your life back. So again, like, share, and subscribe if you want to help us get the word out. Otherwise, we will see you next week. Take care and bye-bye for now.